Numbers are thrown out all the time. Are they proof of some truth or just fluff that bluffs us? These statistics, they need some serious looking into. And that's what I'll do. I'm Brendan Fernandez. We find out the story behind the statistics. Because some numbers are just worth figuring out. Singapore, the little red dot that could. In less than 50 years, we've gone from a third world country to first world. The struggles are familiar to most of us. We have little land, no water, but we have one precious resource, our people. We are a country built on the backs of our human resource. But like all resources, the supply can run out. In fact, the supply of Singaporeans is running so low that we may become extinct in the year 2100. 2100, that's really just 87 years from now. This is a warning sounded by world-famous Swedish medical doctor and statistician, Dr. Hans Rosling.
You see, I was a study nerd. I loved statistics from a young age.
He's an internet sensation who made statistics sexy, and he's long expounded the power of statistics to help us make sense of the world and possibly change it.
How can I stand in front of a learned society and claim that I know things about the future? It's very risky, isn't it?
Dr. Rosling was in Singapore in March 2012, and he warned that Singapore has yet to feel the brunt of declining fertility.
The thing behind this has already happened.
Dr. Rosling, where did you get this idea from? From the official total fertility rate of Singapore, which is 1.2?
It was not me, it was United Nations Population Division. I don't do any numbers, I explain numbers. It's very clear that if one woman just gets one child, the population will halve in each generation. And in the end, there will be one Singaporean woman with one little boy on the island, and that's it.
Extinction in 87 years. That means my great-grandchildren could be amongst the last Singaporeans on the planet. But how do experts like Hans Rosling know how many kids my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren are going to have? For that, they work with what is commonly known as the total fertility rates, or TFR. We hear the term TFR a lot, especially from our politicians. But how is that calculated? Is it simply taking the total number of children born and dividing that by the number of women within childbearing age? Well, it's not that simple. To explain how it's really calculated, I've engaged the help of 7 women. Each of them represents an age group spanning 5 years. 15 to 19 years old, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, 40 to 44, and 45 to 49 years old. Between them, they represent women from 15 to 49 years old, which are basically the ages when women bear children. What statisticians do is take the total number of children born to women in this group and divide that by the number of women found in this age group. For example, there are 155,600 women aged between 30 and 34 years old. In total, they gave birth to 13,926 babies last year. We take the number of births divided by the number of women. That number is then multiplied by 1,000. We end up with what is called the age-specific fertility rate, which is 89.5. Repeat across the age groups. Okay, so now we know the specifics. How then do we get the total fertility rate? We add up the rates across the age groups. We get 239.9. We multiply that by 5 because that's the number of years found in each age group. And then we divide that by 1,000. And that's how we arrive at a TFR of 1.2 for Singapore. TFR is commonly used to project future populations, but it has some limitations. A dip in TFR could reflect fewer babies born, but it could also be a result of mothers deciding to have babies later. So the assumption that population is declining simply because TFR is sliding may turn out to be a premature one.
On a more structural basis, when we have lots of people postponing marriage and postponing having children, the TFR will also go down. It need not mean that they are having fewer children. They may make up for it in the older age groups. And maybe 10 years later, when they're in the 30s, the TFR will go up. That is the effect of postponement. Yeah, so you can see fluctuations.
But when the decline holds out for a long period of time, like in Singapore, low TFR is then usually used as a reflection of baby drought. Singapore's total fertility rate has remained below 1.3 for the past 10 years. How did we end up with so few babies? We'll need to take a walk through Singapore's history. We'll start with the years since 1965, the year Singapore gained her independence. And over here, we'll plot our total fertility rates. The rate of 2.1 can be seen around here. 2.1 is known as the population replacement rate. And why is 2.1 the replacement rate for Singapore? I found that out earlier.
For a country of Singapore's level of development and mortality rates, every girl born gives birth to 2.1 children to replace herself and her male counterpart in the next generation. 2.1, we need that little extra because, not all the babies born will survive through the reproductive years until they have replaced themselves. Yeah, so we need a little bit more. But for a country, with higher mortality rates, usually the less developed countries, it may be even 2.3 or more before, the replacement level is attained.
Any number higher than 2.1 means our population is growing. A lower number means a shrinking population. In 1965, our mothers were kept quite busy with a fertility rate of 4.6. In the next 5 years, per capita income grew by a staggering 79%. As expected, more wealth and more education means smaller families. Birth rates went lower when the government introduced birth control policies like the Stop at 2 campaign in 1972. So let's plot the TFR. The last time Singapore produced babies above the replacement rates was in 1976. But if you look closer, the dipping numbers spiked a few times. And no, it wasn't when Viagra was introduced. In fact, there was an even better aphrodisiac. These were the years when the dragon took its turn in the Chinese zodiac. Everybody, it seems, loves a dragon baby. But if you look between the peaks and search for the lowest points, another pattern emerges. So what happened? These were the years of the tiger. Not such good years for a country hungry for new babies. The baby draw could also be attributed to financial crises, like the Asian financial crisis, which hit in 1998, or the lean years following the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008. We are here, at this point. Things are clear. History has been written. But what about the future? It might be a long time before Singaporeans once again produce at the replacement rate of 2.1. But in the meantime, the hope is that birth rate will at least reach 1.4 or 1.5. That was the TFR in the late 1990s. If we did it then, surely we can do it again. But if we don't, is Dr. Hans Rosling right? Are Singaporeans really in danger of disappearing by the year 2100 if we continue at a TFR of 1.2?
According to my very rough calculation, I think 2100 is too early for us to go extinct. Yeah, there will still be some of us left. For example, let me show you. Say like if we start with 100 persons in generation 1. So at 1.2 total fertility rate, maybe they'll produce like about 60 children. That is generation 2. And then 36 children in generation 3. And so on. Until, yes, you finally get one man left standing. If I assume that, the generation length is about 30 years, it's 30 years between one generation and the next, my calculation will be that, it will be way past 2100 before we reach this point of one person left.
If Dr. Yap's calculation is anything to go by, if we continue at a TFR of 1.2, it'll only be in the year 2283 when we finally become extinct. 2283, that might still be a lifetime away. But so we don't go the way of the dinosaurs, plans are already afoot. For the past 30 years, our TFR has been below the replacement rate of 2.1. This means that by 2025, the Singapore population size will start to decline. To improve the TFR, the plan is to bring in 30,000 permanent residents or PRs each year, of which 15 to 25,000 of them will become new citizens. Permanent residence refers to the intermediate status through which foreigners take up citizenship. This will hopefully bring the resident population up from the current 3.82 million to between 4.2 to 4.4 million residents in 2030. The rest of the economy and population needs will be met by transient foreign workers, which includes our domestic helpers and S-Pass holders.
All this talk about Singaporeans going extinct seems a little far-fetched when you're caught in a rush hour like this. But then again, I am standing in the third most densely populated territory in the world. Right now, there are 5.3 million people living in Singapore. If we take that number and divide it by our landmass, we get what is called the gross population density. That works out to an average of 7,257 people occupying every square kilometer.
Lesson 1.
Now, just how much real estate is that for each person? We'll use a football field to illustrate this. Now, as we mentioned earlier, every square kilometer has an average of 7,257 people. This means each person has a space of about 11.7 meters by 11.7 meters. Now, that's his slice of Singapore. If we play around with footballers in a football field, Singapore can have 25 footballers living in a space the size of half a football field. That's 50 footballers to one football field. Compare this to other cities in Asia. In Shanghai, 40 people to one football field. How about Tokyo? We know that city is crowded. But each football field can hold 42.73 Japanese. Now, we've been hearing the figure 11,000 persons per square kilometer. But that's net population density. Your slice of Singapore does shrink when we use that. Net population density is derived by dividing population by land which can be developed. So that leaves out reservoirs and ports and golf courses because you can't really live in them. Not legally anyway. So how do we fit everyone in? By building upwards and growing in size.
Very good.
I'm standing at the famous Raffles Hotel. Now that's Beach Road over there. It's called Beach Road because back in 1965, if I were to take a step in that direction, I'd have landed in the sea. But in 2013, this is how much further I can go. Through land reclamation, Singapore has grown from 580 square kilometers to 714.3 square kilometers. Let's take a look at how much Singapore has grown. We're looking at 23% brand new land. Other than land size, the way our population has spread out over the island has changed too. Here's a picture of what 3.27 million Singaporeans and PRs called home at the turn of the millennium in the year 2000. The white areas are home to less than 10,000 people, like Changi, River Valley, and Newton. The more people who live there, the darker the color. The two darkest patches, over at the east, were home to 500,000 people.
Bedok houses the biggest population at over 284,000. While Tampines is a close second at over 253,000.
Fast forward 10 years to 2010, much looks the same. Areas like Bukit Merah, Bukit Panjang, Choa Chu Kang, and Jurong West have seen a gradual influx of people.
However, the most dramatic shifts from backwater to boom town happened right here in Sengkang and Punggol. While Singapore has grown in size, we are still one of the most densely populated countries in the world, third place to be exact. And when you look at who else is in that league, you'll notice an interesting trend. Hong Kong, fourth place with more than 6,000 per square kilometer. Macau, first place with more than 18,000 per square kilometer. And we all share the same dismal total fertility rate of 1.2. Is there an inverse relationship between population density and fertility rate?
It could be because, the highly densely populated cities are also very expensive. Maybe the rooms are very small. And so people who really want children, may find that it's not conducive to having children there. So they move out to the suburbs. So those that are left in the cities are usually the unmarried people or people who are married and no children.
It does appear less space, less babies. But it's also because we have less babies that we need to bring in more people. How many people can we have by 2030? There have been several figures thrown up over the years. 10 years ago, in 2003, 5.5 million was the projected population in the Master Plan for National Development. But 1 million was added to that in 2007, when the then Minister for National Development, Ma Baotan, quoted 6.5 million.
Without growth, we stagnate, and there will be no future.
A year later, then Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew mentioned,
my projection would be for somewhere around 5 to 5.5. I have not quite been sold on the idea that we should have 6.5 million.
In 2012, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said Singapore can accommodate 6 million or so people.
现在人口是500多万了，那以后有多少呢？600多万应该没问题。
In January 2013, a population white paper unveiled the planning figure of a projected total population of possibly 6.5 to 6.9 million by 2030. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong subsequently said it should be significantly lower than 6.9 million. Why do the figures change over the years? For some insight, we're turning to Singapore's former chief statistician and former director of UN Statistics.
We seem to get the impression that the numbers are changing, but actually the basic parameters have not changed that much. And we are still working on the same kind of trajectory that we have been working on in the past years. In the 1990s, we did a big review. The population trajectory was moving towards 4 million. And later on, the government continued with this planning exercise, and then the upper limit of the trajectory was moved to 6.8 million. And now it was moved further to 6.9 million. But it's on the same set of big parameters.
Dr. Cheong is saying, despite constant changes in population size, the basic parameters used to gauge how many locals will live here in the future have remained pretty constant. Basic parameters like fertility rate, mortality rate, and the rate of natural increase, all of these have remained stable. What's volatile is the number of foreigners living here, and those numbers are largely determined by reactions to the economy.
But this, of course, the 6.9 million population is only the projected numbers. And then eventually, if the economy slows down, for example, the number of foreign workforce demand has reduced. It's going to be reduced because of the economic slowdown. Then our population may enter into a slower growth period. Then we may take much, much longer to go for the 6.9 million population.
Singapore's current population stands at 5.3 million. We're looking at a 32% increase. Fitting everybody in is both a science and an art. But there is a lot in the pipeline. By 2030, we will have 800 more buses, a doubling of the rail network, and 700,000 new homes to be built by 2016. More, not less, parks and green spaces for all.
We are a country that cannot stand still. Everywhere you look, there's growth. For example, that's the Pasir Panjang terminal over there. There'll be enough new space added by 2014, all within 10 years, to allow port capacity to increase by 50%. Our little red dot is getting a little bit bigger. Extinction?
Probably not. Plans to keep us around for much longer are already afoot. And as for my fellow Singaporeans, we'll still be staking our claim here for a good number of years yet.